Hey everyone, it's your favorite freak. And you guessed it, it's time for another doll video. This time I'll be splitting my process into different parts, each one covering a different process, and hopefully I'll be able to go more into depth of the details I put in each one of them. This also means that I'll be able to upload more often, and it takes a huge workload off my shoulders, and means that I'll probably be more relaxed throughout the process of making and editing these. I will most likely be changing the format of all of my future doll videos to this style, so I hope it works out for everyone. Alright, so this time I will be making Bayonetta. For those who don't know, Bayonetta is an action-adventure video game published by Sega in 2009. The character Bayonetta is born from an Umbran witch and a Lumen sage. This is a forbidden act, and as such, Bayonetta was raised as an outcast. Because she's a hybrid of two different types of magic, she has all kinds of interesting powers. After waking up from centuries of hibernation without any memories of her past, you know, Legend of Zelda style, Bayonetta begins posing as a nun in order to locate and battle angels from Paradisa. Using weapons forged by the weaponsmith/bartender, Bayonetta faces Paradisa's hierarchy. I would go more in depth of the plot of the game, but I honestly can't remember it all. It would take too long. Moving on. Originally, I was going to use Ghoulia Yelp's face and body for this, but I took a look at Bayonetta's features and compared it to Ghoulia's and decided that it just wasn't working. So I found an old misprinted Nephra Denial head, and I decided that her more rounded face yet angular features were more accurate for what I wanted. As always, I removed her face printing with 100% acetone, and then I cut off her hair, and then plunged her head into a pot of boiling water. Make sure you drown your dolls thoroughly for optimal hair removal. I go in with pliers and remove all the leftover plugs in her head. Her head was so full of glue this time around, like bruh, it was nasty wasty. And then with an acetone-soaked cotton pad, I remove the printing on her head and make sure everything is all squeaky clean. Alright, let's move on to the body itself. The normal Monster High bodies aren't proportioned like Bayonetta, so I figured I would dive into my first real serious body mods. I armed myself with reference photos of the body type that I was going for, and I got to work. For all my mods, I will be using Epoxy Sculpt. I mix equal parts A and B, and work on accentuating her legs, booty, and bust. Even though this process was a little awkward at times, it was a really good study in human proportions and anatomy. And with that knowledge, I realized that I really didn't like how curved the Monster High body's backs are. So, I cut her in half. I reposition her accurately, anchor her two halves with a piece of wire and epoxy, and after I tipped the body forward a bit, I noticed that her neck was then positioned too far forward as well. So I hacked that off too, drilled holes in both pieces and attached them with more wires and Epoxy Sculpt. And now, with some sanding, all of her body mods are finished. Oh yeah, except for one thing. Her arm has been removed. This happened while I was sanding her. I was moving her arms out of the way and didn't notice that her left arm had been stopped up with epoxy or something, and I wasn't twisting her arm by the joint, but rather the bare plastic attached to the joint, and it just sorta, you know, fell off, as your arms do. So, I tried drilling/melting holes into each part to create my own little peg out of wire or something, but nothing would hold. So I turned to my most violent and disturbing method. Doctor, we have to make a transplant. I select the most broken down dolls in my collection, a Frankenstein and a Venus McFlytrap. I chose Venus because she was just that much more broken, and I decided that if I had to ruin a doll, it might as well be the saddest one in my collection. I'm so sorry. So I split her open with a pair of pliers to retrieve my desired left shoulder. Guys, I think my hobby is morally wrong. I think something has been violated. I'm not quite sure what, but this seems wrong to me. And now, with the information of what's inside a monster high torso and how to split it in half, I have faith in doing the same thing on future Bayonetta here. I did this by anchoring a pair of pliers in her arm socket and just casually wrenching it open. A rather frightening endeavor, but it worked nonetheless. And thankfully it split in the back, and I was able to remove the arm peg. And it looks by the little melted bit in the peg that when I put the wires in for the neck when I reattached it, I accidentally drilled into her arm peg, stopping it from moving. So with that out of the way, I tried the functional arm, and it looks like everything fits okay. I ended up removing the rest of her back and neck, shaved off some of the extra epoxy and plastic bits that got in the way. Then I put everything back in place and fixed everything back together with more epoxy. Now, after all this trauma, you would never even notice. Aside from the fact that one of her arms is green. But that's not important. And now I sand everything down. And by everything, I mean everything. All the epoxy, all the plastic, all the stuff. All of it. Now that we're finished with that absolute mess, we can move on to... I apologize that I have to leave this on a cliffhanger. I don't know when the next installment of this process will be, because at the time I'm recording this, I'm actually still working on her, but I promise it will be soon. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Keep creating. Bye!